light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. In 21 years of being Sister Who, I've encountered, I think, just about every religious or philosophical path out there at some point or another, or at least more of them than I can count, shall we say. Toward the beginning, though, I wanted to do something that was inclusive, something that that at least as far as I was concerned didn't leave anybody out. And so I was trying to figure out what is the common center of all these different spiritual paths and different spiritual experiences. I'd already come up with conclusions such as life is primarily about the growth of the soul, which is a conclusion that I've tested from every which direction, and I'd be perfectly comfortable testing it from 100 more directions. But I haven't found any perspective or direction yet that has any strong disagreement with the notion that life is primarily about the growth of the soul. It's an interpretive approach that allows everything to make sense, that whether you're rich or poor, of whatever race, whatever a speaker of whichever language, whatever religious path, that ultimately what they all have in common is that life, that it can still all make sense if life is about the growth of the soul, that what matters is not so much what we experience as what we learn from it. So that if by the accident of birth, as one person called it, we are born into a wealthy circumstance, or we're born into a poor one, or born into this country or that country, or born into the middle of a famine, you still don't have to say this was a wasted life or a meaningless life if the soul within that person was able to learn something, experience something, or develop something by its experience. Compassion, sensitivity, wisdom, breadth of vision, there's all sorts of possibilities. On the other hand, there are some who have been born into circumstances where they have every conceivable advantage, but they seem to be orchestrating things in a sort of self-serving fashion that doesn't go anywhere beyond the person. And I've spoken with some of these people where their whole goal is basically to stagnate, to accomplish a good income, a nice home, a beautiful family, a beautiful car, and just coast from there on out. Not really struggling with anything, not wrestling with any question, not growing, not developing themselves, not learning a new language, not acquiring a new ability, absolutely nothing. Just going through a daily routine of get up in my nice house, get into my beautiful car, drive to work, have perfect relationships with coworkers, drive home again to my beautiful house, watch TV and go to bed. Every day the same, and calling that success. And I find myself looking at that going, are you really alive? Or are you just existing in a very pampered sort of way? At some point life is going to run out, and it's kind of like Thoreau lamenting, saying, not so much lamenting, but saying that the reason he went to Walden Pond is because he didn't want to come to the point of death and realize that he had never lived. And so he wanted to live life fully, to know it close up and intentionally and intensely, to know it for what it is, and to know the truth of it. He was very much a pursuer of truth. And Thoreau didn't seem to think he could do that without reducing life to its minimum pieces and finding out what it really was. Beneath all the surfaces, beneath all the forms, what do we really have? And his whole experiment at Walden Pond is all written down in the book of the same name, Walden. But the point being to know that you live while you do it, to to live and not get to the point of death and realizing that you hadn't lived. But as I was trying to figure out some way of bringing all these different things together, all the different people I've met, New Age and pagan and Christian and Jewish and Hindu and Buddhist and just absolutely everything, nature-oriented spirituality and atheistic spiritualities, all sorts of things. And what I came up with finally was what I decided to call the blessing of Sisterhood. Essentially, it's the phrase I'm most fond of saying, may one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. But I wanted to take one of these episodes and dig more into what is the meaning and the content and the implication of that, because it's a rather concise, simplistic sort of phrase in a way, but there's a very deliberate intention behind each word in it. Begin where the word may. It's an invitation. It's a request of sort. It's not a command or a demand that I'm going to be impatient or upset or I'm going to throw a tantrum if I don't get what I want. It's an invitation. May, one, the individual, the person, the self. That just because I am not a community, a church of 100 or a community of 1,000 or a nation of 10,000, I'm only one individual, that I still matter to the divine, I still matter to life, I still matter in the bigger picture, because any one of us could be the catalyst for all sorts of changes and possibilities from which the rest of the world might abundantly benefit, but more so if that world is willing to recognize the package of potentiality and possibilities that I as a unique individual represent, and that each of us as unique individuals represent. May one and all. So it's not just me, but it's all. It's every other person, every member of the community, even the off reference challenge of loving the unlovable. That there is somehow a sense in which everything is interconnected, and in being interconnected, there's an invitation, perhaps even a certain, I don't want to say pressure, but a certain need for constructive relationship going on, that if somebody else in the community isn't getting their needs met, if they're not being included, if they're not being hugged and embraced somehow, it would be very logical for that person to wind up being more cynical and skeptical and isolated and unhappy. That somehow there needs to be this interconnection between the two. Community renews itself by nurturing its individuals, no matter how eccentric or anomalous they may be. And individuals, conversely, survive by contributing to their communities. In my perhaps idealized sense of tribal society, this is where the community makes sure that everybody in the community is getting their needs met. And the individual, on the other hand, each of those individuals within the community is doing whatever they can to support and nourish their community, so that each is basically working toward the other's survival, and even more than survival, toward each of them thriving. The community wants to see every individual in the community thrive, and the individual wants to see his community thrive. But they can only do that by living in a symbiotic relationship where each is providing something for the other. So I came up with the blessing, may one and all and everything. Everything goes beyond the community, beyond people, beyond what we can see. Everything that exists, seen or unseen. The spiritual dimensions of reality and life, as well as the material ones. We didn't know that radiation existed until somebody was able to document it, and finally someone created the Geiger counter, but it was still there all along. There may be untold multiple dimensions of spiritual reality, with dynamics and populations and languages that are totally unknown to us at the present time. I do not have the resources or the technology to prove that they do exist, but neither does anyone have the resources or technology to prove that they don't exist. And so we allow the possibility and hope that if it really is true, that at some point we will develop a means of speaking with and interacting with whatever life is in that dimension of being. But in the meantime, at the very least, we have the environment around us. That when we say, may one and all and everything, we're talking about the air we breathe, the water we drink, the earth on which we land, the earth on which we live, the land in which the trees grow that may become our house, or the land in which the stones are found that may be built into a house, or any number of other things. The whole natural world and all the populations on this planet, human, primate, mammal, reptilian, birds, fish, all of it, it's all part of everything. What part of all don't you understand? What part of everything don't you understand? That sort of teasing rhetorical question, that everything is everything, and it goes way beyond the planet Earth to the whole galaxy and everything that in fact exists, whether we will ever see it or prove its existence or not. So, may one and all and everything. Now we've included all the different levels, and by so doing we've recognized that life is multidimensional and multi-level, that there is a microcosm and a macrocosm. There is a local level and a universal level, and there are all sorts of levels in between. And it's not that any one of them is more or less important than another, but rather that each of them occupies a place within the overall scheme. And that by occupying that place in a healthy fashion, it makes the existence of the others both possible and sustainable. So now that I've identified the recipients of this blessing I'm praying, the next line is, blessed and loved ever be. When I say blessed, to me the thing that is central to that is the inhabitation, the energy of life, the energy of spirit within all of the things just named. That when we say it's blessed, it's that it is full of life. It is full of something infinite and transcendent and beautiful and wise and loving, and so we're asking all of that to be present with and within one and all and everything. And whether the all that is, if we can call it that, whether the all that is decides to manifest itself in this way or that way through person or animal or mineral or whatever, I leave to the multidimensional transcendent wisdom of the all that is, which could also be referenced as divine mystery. I choose to use the word God, but when I write it, I spell it Godde. It's pronounced the same way, but by going with God, Godde, I can, it harkens back actually to my earliest days of Catholic school, when I was instructed by the nuns that God was described as if a man, but that in reality God was more than man or woman or personhood ever could be. That God was the embodiment of the infinite, and we are the finite. And for the finite to comprehend the infinite is a pretty impossible task. The sheer dimensions, it would be like trying to pour the ocean into a single drinking glass. It simply wouldn't fit. There's just too much. So even, I guess from the nuns I met in my earliest Catholic Sunday school, getting this sense that God was transcendent and so much bigger than what any church or philosopher had ever imagined. And to ask that magnificence to inhabit the creation, to inhabit each of us, to inhabit you and I and everything we see around us in some way, to some degree, to whatever degree is possible. Certainly nothing we see, and most especially not ourselves, are able to encompass the whole of it. But I think we can experience enough that we know there's something there, that there is something beyond us which calls us to be more than we've ever been thus far. So, blessed and loved ever be. When I say loved ever be, to love something is to value its happiness more than your inclusion in it. It's to want someone to have what they need, and more than that, to thrive in their living of life, even if that particular experience of thriving does not include oneself. It's like saying, I want to give someone a birthday party, and I don't even care whether I'm invited. I am just so impressed by them, and I love them so much that I simply want them to have their birthday party. It's not about me, it's about them. And it's about giving unconditionally and completely, rather than giving with the expectation of receiving something back, which, in a sense, then it becomes little more than a loan. And if they don't give back enough, then it's also a matter of scorekeeping, which, again, is adversarial to love. The final word, ever be, this basic word of be, is kind of an interesting anomaly, because in some languages it doesn't exist. Because if existence isn't already there, it's regarded as redundant to say that something is there when it's clearly already there, so they simply don't use the word is, or the word to be. And yet it's the existing and the being and the looking in the mirror and seeing a reflection that is a point from which we need to begin. That when the first step needs to be that self-awareness that I do exist. The philosopher René Descartes was wrestling with this question, and what he came up with was, I think, therefore I am. The idea being that thought is the primary proof of consciousness, of sentience, of existence. Perhaps from a certain perspective. I understand that, I respect it, and yet in my life experience there's been all kinds of things beyond that as well, so that I don't want to limit myself to saying only those things capable of thought are capable of genuine being, because there are other ways of communicating perceptions and intuitions and relationships that I'm not sure whether they include conscious thoughts or not. And if they don't, that's okay. I think I would have more of a problem with them not having any place for love. Somehow overlooking this primary binding force in the universe, that there's something about love that moves us to give to those in need, that moves us to form attachments and relationships, that moves us to embrace life in a way that we otherwise never would, because it's too confusing and too fearful in and of itself. And life is a very complex place. I've heard a number of people speak of simplicity and wanting things to be simple, but it seems to me that it only is simple when you simply don't regard the details. It's not that the details aren't there, but it's that somehow they're not regarded and respected and responded to in the way they need to be. So, having come up with this blessing that could now be said at any Christian, pagan, New Age, Buddhist, atheist, whatever, because I had sufficiently avoided the language that was particular to certain contexts. I at last had a blessing I could say anywhere to anyone, and they would be granted thereby the permission to interpret these words and phrases in the way that was most empowering to them. I've often used this song also, actually, come to think of it, with spiritual cleansings and various other blessings, as well as being a concluding sort of thing to say at the end of a presentation. Then I decided to set it to music, and probably the happiest I've ever been in reference to this song was the time when I did a presentation at a graduate level educational institution, and their choir responded to my request that the song be sung in as a 4-part round. And they did, and it was absolutely beautiful. Obviously, I can't sing around with myself, but I am working on learning the basic blessing in 3 other languages, hoping to put in my 4th album a recording of me singing this in 3 languages. But essentially the words are, may one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. And see if I can sing that for you now. May one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. May one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. May one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. May one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. So that's the blessing of sisterhood, which I have occasionally used for house cleansings also, because I've heard, I don't know that we can prove it or disprove it, but I've heard that sometimes if a spirit leaves this life in a particularly violent way, it somehow gets stuck and doesn't always know that it's gone, and isn't sure whether to move on to whatever new place or to stay. And so as I was doing a spiritual cleansing in somebody's house once, I kept singing this song over and over and over again, and visualizing that if there were any trapped and broken spirits in the place, that they would be healed somehow, and so that they could be released to go on to whatever it is they needed to go to. You know, and also visualizing anybody who I knew might be living in the house at some point in the future, that they would find healing and peace within that place, and that they would find whatever was lacking, that they would find a way to become the most they could ever be, that it would not be just a question of resigning themselves to whatever adversarial circumstances life provided, but that instead it would be a way of reaching out and joining hands with something much greater than themselves in order to give to the world more than they thought they could give. And I don't know if any of us ever know exactly what we could do, because so much of it depends upon how well we grow and how well we respond to the intervention of the divine. You know, whether you consider that providence, as Abraham Lincoln did, or serendipity, or something more personified. The point, I guess, though, is that the blessing and the love should extend to one and all and everything, that there should be nobody left out. That it's not just about me being blessed, but it's about everybody else being blessed too. That it's not just about me having enough, but everyone else too. Because at some point, and in the same way that they may need me now, I may need them then. That I regardless of what I've experienced, can emotionally embrace them, can genuinely wish the very, very best for them, can do what I can to support that blessing and that love within their lives, that I may in fact be the hands of God to bring to someone a healing truth and a healing love. One of the things I most liked about the show, the television show Ghost Whisperer, when it was on a number of years ago, was that in every single case, what resolved the problem was always when the full truth came out. As long as there was one piece of truth missing from the story, everything would be kind of stuck. But when the full truth came out, then there would be love and forgiveness and healing and release. In a similar sort of way, I pray that whatever adversarial circumstances you encounter this week will be insufficient to defeat the power of love and wisdom within you. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Thank you for watching.